Good everyone, welcome to this video. Today we have a sort of mini series that is going to be happening for just a couple of weeks just to get it done because as I mentioned in the Donia 217 J1 um, Forgotten Vehicles flight, I got asked by a sub, Itzrainyboy, for a premium showcase, like to show off all the premiums that you've got over the years, talk about them a little bit, and go through and just do it as a whole. Now, there's only one problem with that. As much as I'd love to do that, I'm not doing that in one sitting, because trust me, I have a shit ton of premiums. And if I was to do that in one sitting, I'm fairly certain I wouldn't have a voice for a couple of weeks, and I don't really want that to happen. So instead, we're going to be splitting it up into nations. Obviously, some nations will combine them, like China's getting combined with Italy, because China only has like 6 vehicles, well, 5 vehicles for me, because I only have 5 vehicles in China without a premium. Um, and I will be mentioning any vehicles that I plan to add to the collection as we go through. So let's get started. So the P26A34 has started us off, and you've seen quite a few videos on this little guy, and well, it's certainly not as good or as fun as it used to be, but it's a nice little low-tier buzz box, you know? It's just something that you take out to just chill in. It's nothing you take serious. And that's what I like about the pea shooters. They're not serious aircraft, they're just fun little aircraft. And they still do that. Sure, the competition slaps them into the ground nowadays, looking at you, CW21. But yeah, this is certainly an aircraft that, if it's cheap on the marketplace, I wouldn't say get it straight away. Put the G into something like the B10B or Gala's F3F if you don't have them already, because that's what I'd do. Moving on to said B10B, we have the B10B. I adore this thing. This thing is great in ground forces. It's okay in air battles. The bomb load is very good for what it is, because obviously it's only a 1.3 bomber. You don't expect much out of these things, but a single 2,000 per bomb, yeah, that's going to mess up, and it's a lot more agile than the B18A is. So it's a lot more effective to work with, and whilst I wouldn't say this is the premium you should get, if you was purchasing a rank 1 premium, it's still a good one to consider. But which one would I consider you lot to purchase, if you haven't already? Well, it's right here. Gala's F3F. This is one of my favourite little low-tier buzz boxes in the US. I mean, it's a biplane, it turns like a Chaika, goes pretty fast for a biplane. And it's versatile. I mean, it's got a 50 caliber gun to take out light tanks. It's got a couple of bombs you can see there, and the 7.62 can clean up light targets pretty well as well. And for just 250 golden eagles, you'd be stupid not to buy this thing. Let's put it that way. And I know we're probably going to get Harry saying, "Why would you say this over Thatcher's F2A?" There's a good reason for that, and I'm going to explain that. Speaking of Thatcher's F2A1, we have Thatcher's F2A1. This was my very first premium. This thing holds dear to my heart, and whilst I would have included it in Remember in the past, I just didn't really see a point because A, I could do it at some other point, and B, I just this thing is not the same. And what I mean by that is when I first got this thing, you did not have these 250s in the wings. You only had a single 50 in the nose and a single 30 in the nose. And this thing was at 1.3. Now, sure, it was very good at that time, but to me, this just isn't the same bird anymore. It's at 2.3, where it gets frequent up tiers to 3.3 and gets slapped pretty hard. Now, sure, it can still compete, but why would you buy Thatcher's when it's at 2.3 and you could just go and get one of these three, which you're going to see next? If this thing was at 1.3 and didn't have the extra guns, I would probably suggest buying this over Gala's F3F. But until that day arises, which I don't think it will, just buy Gala's for your low tier rank 1 premium. Next up, we have another one of my personal favourites, the American Kai 43 Oscar. This is certainly a premium that I've had my fair share of fun in. I sent a replay to Jamonkey a couple of years ago, and I had a sick carry in this thing. It was really, shall we say, difficult to pull off. I did have to sit around the runway a little bit, but that's only because I had no ammo. I was out of bullets, and the enemies just kept coming. So I thought, okay, I'll just use the thing's maneuverability, and they literally couldn't hit me for the most part. This thing was so agile. And whilst this thing is a tad expensive at 1,000 golden eagles, if you're really more of a if you prefer your key 43s over your key 61s and A6M2s, this is a good premium to pick up. Just wait for a sale though, and that's what I would personally suggest anyway. Next up, we have my US Kai 61 1B. This is again another one of my more favorited premiums because Harry's been shouting this thing out for donkeys now. He's been saying, Joe, you should get this thing. Joe, you should get this thing. And I was like, yep, I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. And every time there's always another premium that will catch my eye. And I'd just be like, that first, this later. And I eventually got around to getting this thing back in November of last year. And I'm really happy with it. It's a good premium, whilst it is neglected by the player base, Bowtime Gaming. Um, it's a premium that a lot of people sleep on, I think, and I don't see why. Now, a reason why I brought up Bo there is because in his USA Premium Buying Guide, he knocked this thing off, and I was like, hold on a minute, that's not really a fair assessment. And yet, the other US captured premiums and other tech trees were fine to him, which just isn't. To me, that's not how you do a premium buying guide, you know? You don't have a bias towards other captured vehicles and well, US captured vehicles in other nations. That's just not fair to me. You're meant to give each individual vehicle an equal chance, and he didn't give this thing a chance. I gave this thing a good review, and personally, it's a very good aircraft. You just have to learn how to fly it. Speaking of another good aircraft, we have my Akutan Zero. I still use this thing to this day to do dailies, and it's an incredible plane. I mean, sure, it's a Zero and it's in the US tech tree, and this thing's been in the pay to win video. Well, what is pay to win video, and it's also been in the runway camping video. This thing's had its fair share of moments on the channel, and I don't think that's going to be ending anytime soon. The USA 6M2 Akutan Zero is one of my favorite premiums now, and well, what more can I say about it? It's a great vehicle. I highly suggest it. It's rank 3, and well, you'd be stupid to not pick it up. Unless you didn't have the next vehicle, the Bf109 F4. Now, I know Harry's going to say, what about XP50, which is literally right after this? That's another option. I'm going to get to that in a second. I know what Harry's thinking. I mean, even though I haven't spoken to him for a couple of weeks, because well, I say that, I would have done by the time this video comes out, but I haven't really been on Discord with him that much, because I've been obviously off on my 2-week break. But now that I'm back, I'm probably going to have to mention that I'm including him a lot in this video and also the other videos as well. But yeah, this is a good alternative to the XP50 if you're not a fan of twin engine heavy fighters, even though XP50 pretty much flies like a single engine fighter. But if you're more of a fan of single engine fighters, I'd pick this one up because you get German firepower, you get climb rate for days, and it's just a great plane. And plus, the Germans don't expect it. Half the time, they're carrying pods, so you're at a significant advantage over them. And speaking of that, we have my precious, my XP50. This thing recently was in War Bonds, and if you did not get this thing, all I'm saying is you are a muppet. If you've already got this thing, then congrats to you, and I hope you got the SMK instead, or the German Churchill. But if you haven't got this thing and you did not get it in War Bonds, you are missing out. Let's put it that way. For 1750 GE, this is arguably one of my favorite premiums, if not my favorite. And yes, it's a tad clubby. Yes, it gets an airspawn when it really shouldn't. And yes, it's got a climb rate which can match most aircraft at its BR, even up to 6.0. But if I ever need to chillax and I actually want to take things seriously, I'm taking this bird out, and she never lets me down. Next up, we have a relatively new addition to this part of the premium showcasing, is the F2g Corsair. This is the Battle Pass vehicle from last Battle Pass. That was in, I think that was in December, wasn't it? Well, near December. I think it started in November, but this was certainly a vehicle that has its fair share of pilots that love it and hate it. I quite like this thing, but the problem is I haven't flown it since the SU9 and SU11 came out, and I really don't want to see what that's like. Um, and of course, I've only done one video on this vehicle, which quite a lot of, well, I got a couple of dislikes on that because I basically roasted a moron. But hey, if you came here and didn't expect me to roast a moron, then well, that's just how it is. I think it's a good aircraft. The problem is I think it needs to go down to 6.0 personally. It's well, A, it's missing power, and B, having 50s is arguably worse because the A&M3s hit like a semi-truck. And 650s are nice, but you actually don't get that much ammo in this thing. So it's really down to your personal preference. Moving on to the last bit. Well, last bit. Sorry, my throat's a little dry. Moving on to the last bit of our little premium showcase, we have the tanks. Of course, I'm going to include the tanks at the end because it's just easier that way. But yeah, this will be it for today after we do these four because Germany is going to take forever and I really don't want to do that in one sitting. So, as I mentioned, it'll be split up into parts. So we have the US M2A4 1st Armored Division. The only difference? That decal you see on the front. It's an okay premium. I just wouldn't buy it personally. It's fun. I'm not saying it's bad, but there's a better premium which you can also get with a week of premium, a bird, and 120k SL. But we'll go into that later. Overall, don't buy this thing, but even so. Then we have my Lvt A4, which I remember on the video where I showcased that I got this thing. There was one guy in the comments who immediately deleted his comment after, who accused me of buying them, and I was like, okay, but I literally said in the video it took 8 to 9 hours to get both done, but clearly people don't listen in this day and age. This thing isn't amazing. I don't particularly like this thing. The gun depression is very limited over the front of the vehicle, and in order to get the full rotation, you actually have to turn the turret to the side. And for German HVAP spam, that actually makes it easier for them to kill you, which is quite hard. And the fact that this thing has at most 12 millimeters of front armor, and the turret has at most, well, 30, I think it's 38 millimeters on the front, on the gun mantlet, it's just not impressive. And I don't regret getting this thing because I don't think we're going to see this thing for an awful while. But when was the last time I played it? Good question. I've forgotten. That's how bad this thing is. I've forgotten. Next up, we have the vehicle that you should buy if you want a Rank 1 Premium. That being the M3A1 US Marine Corps. Now, if you go into your tech tree, you won't actually see this thing. You actually have to buy the US Beginners Pack. I'm going to be doing reviews on those eventually anyway. And this thing is, well, it's great. It's perfect combination of speed, mobility, firepower, and armor protection. The armor protection on the turret especially is extremely trollish. The gun mantlet is extremely good, the gun is good, and the mobility is insane. If you haven't got this thing as the beginner's pack already, I would highly suggest picking it up. And then we come to this thing, the T14. Now I know Hairy Feet's done a couple of videos on this thing, and several YouTubers have also done videos on this thing. Some of them praising it, some of them saying it's bad. And I bet some people are wondering, Joe, which one are you? Good question. And I have a simple answer. It's crap. Now, sure, in a down tier, this thing is very good. The problem is every single time I've taken this vehicle out, I've gotten a max up tier. And when you're fighting tigers and panthers, thanks for that game. Just interrupting me there. Thank you very much. I'm doing this right after the HG51 B2 float plane recording anyway, so that's why I did that. But yeah, as I was saying before the game decided to really interrupt me, um, I think this thing is crap. And if you're going to buy a rank 3 premium for the US, just buy the T20. The T20 is far better. You get a bigger gun, you get much better mobility and a reverse rate that can rival some light tanks, and it's just better. It's miles better. You cannot rely on the armor on this thing, especially when the front of the turret is the weakest part. German 75 has a field day with this thing, and it can even go through the front if you're not angled properly. And it can even go through the sides at some point if you overextend. This is not a vehicle you should buy, simple fact. But of course, I'm not going to fully review these vehicles. I will be doing buying guides in the future because I think that would be something I could get into because I have not a lot of knowledge about these vehicles. But that's something for future Joe to figure out. But anyway, I'm going to let you guys off. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of my premium showcase. Next up will be Germany, and then of course USSR, Great Britain, Japan, China and Italy in one, and France and Sweden in one. I'll see you all later.